In the last lecture, we seen how to use Airodump-ng to list all the networks around us and display useful information about them. Usually, we do this in order to see our target network, see the signal strength, see how far we are from it, and then start targeting this target network. Now, in this example, I'm going to assume that my target network is this one right here. This is actually the network that my host machine is connected to. And now that I have my target network and I have some basic information about it, let's see how we can run Airodump-ng against this network only, not against all networks. And this way we'll be able to gather more information about it. So to do this, first of all, I'm going to have to write the name of my program, which is Airodump-ng. Then I'm going to specify a specific BSS ID or a specific MAC address for Airodump-ng to sniff data from. So my target network has a BSS ID of this. We can see it here under the BSS ID. So I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to do -- BSS ID. And I'm going to give it the BSS ID that I just copied. Next, I'm going to specify a channel for Airodump-ng to sniff on. Again, if we look under the channel column in here, we can see my target network is on channel 2. So I'm going to do -- channel 2. So now we're telling Airodump-ng that I want you to sniff data on channel 2 and only from a network that has this BSS ID. I'm also going to tell Airodump-ng that I want you to store all the data that you're gonna gather for me in a file. So I'm gonna say -- write, and then I'm gonna type a file name, and let's call this test. And at the end, as usual, I need to give it the name of my wireless adapter in monitor mode, which is mon0 in my case. So, very simple command. Let's go over it one more time. We're doing Airodump-ng, that's the name of the program that I want to use. I'm telling it that I only want you to sniff data from a specific BSS ID. Then I'm giving it the BSS ID of my target. Then I'm telling it I want you to only sniff data from a specific channel, and I'm giving it the channel that I wanted to sniff data from. Again, we can get it from here, it's number 2. Finally, I'm telling it that I want you to write all the data that you're going to capture in a file that we're going to call it test. And then I'm giving it my wireless adapter in monitor mode, which is mon0. Now I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see, unlike the last time, Airodump-ng is only showing me one network in here. This is the network that I wanted it to sniff data on. And we can also see we have a completely new section right now. So when I ran Airodump-ng in the previous lecture, you seen I only had the networks in here and I had nothing here at the bottom. But now you can see we have more entries in here at the second section of Airodump-ng. And basically anything that you see here in the second section, these are the clients or the devices connected to this network. So right now we can see this network has 3 devices connected to it, and you can see the MAC addresses of these devices under the station. So you can see all of these devices are connected to the same network. So the BSS ID is still the same. This is the MAC address of the network. And under the station, we have the different clients or different devices connected to this network. We can also see the power. So this is the signal strength of each of these devices. We can see the speed. We can see the amount of data lost. We can see the amount of frames or packets that we have captured. And we can see if any of these devices are still probing for networks. So sometimes when you run Airodump-ng against all networks, you'd still see this section and you'd see that some devices are not connected and they're literally trying or looking for networks. so you'd see the name of the networks that they're looking for under the probe. Now, if I hit Ctrl+C, Airodump-ng will quit, it'll stop working, but I should have new files in my current working directory that contain the data that we just captured. Because remember, when we ran the command, we used the right option in here to store the data in a file called test. So if I just do ls to list all the files in my current working directory, you can see I have 4 files. All of them start with test, but they all have different extensions. So we have a CSV, we have a netxml, we have a cap, and we have a Kismet CSV. Now also notice that Airodump-ng automatically appended -01 to each of these files. So in the future, when you go and try to use the capture file, make sure you append -01 to the file name that you specify in the command. Now, the main file that we're going to be using is the cap file. Again, this file contains the data that we captured during the period that Airodump-ng was working on in here. And basically, this file should contain everything that was sent to and from my target network. So it should contain URLs, chat messages, usernames, passwords, or anything that any of these devices did on the internet. Because anything that they have to do will have to be sent to the router, as we've seen before. The only problem is, if you look at the encryption in here, you can see that my target network uses WPA2 encryption. So all of the data sent between the router and the clients is encrypted. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to use a tool called Wireshark to analyze the data. And don't worry about how to use Wireshark. We will talk about it in details later on. Right now, I just want to make sure that you understand the idea that now we're able to capture all these packets. The only problem is these packets are encrypted. So I'm going to do Wireshark to run Wireshark. And then I'm going to open my capture file. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and it's already in my root directory. So I'm just going to scroll down and select my test1 cap. I'm going to open it, and I'll just put this in full screen. And as you can see, if we click on any of these packets, you can see we really have no useful data. You can see everything looks like gibberish, and we can't read anything, even though these packets might contain usernames, passwords, or URLs. The only useful thing that we can see here is the device manufacturer. So we know one of the devices connected to the network that has this specific MAC address. So it's the one that ends with E8. And if we go up, we can see that it's this specific device. We know now it is an Apple device. So it could be an Apple computer, it could be an iPhone or an iPad. And this is actually my MacBook computer that is the host machine. Again, we can see we also have a device that's using a Huawei chipset. So this can be a phone, or it could be the router. And if you look at the MAC address here and compare it to the MAC addresses that we have here, you can see that this is actually under the BSSID. So this is the MAC address of the router. So now we know that the brand of my router is Huawei. So we can gather more information by opening this file in Wireshark, and we can kind of guess what computers are there and what operating systems they use. But this is not detailed enough, and the main problem with this is the fact that the network is using encryption. Now in the next section, we're going to be talking about how to break this encryption, and once we do, you'll see how we can see the passwords, the usernames in plain text, and you'll also see how we can map all of the computers on the same network, gather detailed information about them, hack into them, and do some really cool stuff. Now you should guess by everything that I said so far, if this network was an open network, if it was a network that does not use any passwords, then you would have been able to actually see all the URLs and everything that they do in here. But again, if you can connect to the network without a password, then you'll automatically be at the post connection section. And in that section, like I said, we're gonna talk about some really cool attacks that you can do once you have the password or once you can connect to the network. So don't worry about Wireshark for now. I just wanted to make sure that you understand why encryption is useful and why it's used and why we can't see much now because we don't know the key. We will talk about Wireshark and all of that later on in the next section.